Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we are here today with a rock star. We're here with Tyler Chiarelli. He's the band leader and lead guitarist for Florida Georgia Line. He was born in 1985 in Kansas City, Missouri. His dad was a guitar player and shared his love of music with Tyler at a young age. He had a real supportive family, and he started playing drums at the age of 5. He was passionate about music above all other activities and began playing gigs at the ripe old age of 7. This continued through high school, and then guitar entered the picture. Percussion became more of an intellectual or scholastic passion, and the emotional hot buttons of it wore off. But guitar sort of took its place, and then it started as a hobby, and it grew to be much more. So like most people that are professional guitarists, he spent hours and hours in his room playing and learning songs. He actually went on to accept a scholarship for percussion and recording arts studies to Missouri Western State University after high school. But all the while, guitar became his main instrument. He left college in 2006 to wind up pursuing music full-time in the Kansas City area, and he moved to Nashville in October 2010. Since being in Nashville, he's held positions with Logan Mize, Daniel Peck, and the Carter Twins. He's been with FGL, Florida Georgia Line, again since 2013, and like I said, he started as a rhythm guitarist, and now he's the lead guitarist and the band leader for the country music duo. As of recent, Tyler's career, I think I meant the right career. Tyler's career and his carrier has been transitioning to a moderate session calendar for artists such as Low Cash, Charles Kelly, and Little Big Town. Also recently entered production world, his first project for Alec Davis with special guest Frankie Ballard. And he's got a beautiful little daughter that's how old?
2.5.
2.5. So congratulations on that, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be among all of the amazing musicians and people you've had.
Well, you're one of them.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, man, it's an honor.
Hey, you started playing gigs at age 7. Most people are playing with Legos, man. What's the backstory to that?
So my dad's a guitar player. He's from Memphis, actually, and he grew up kind of in that R&B scene and. Has always played guitar, and around I think it was like 1990, he formed a band with some of his great friends, and they ended up calling themselves Poker Face, and it was like it was a high end cover gig, and they played around the Kansas City area, and it would kind of branch out to like the 4-state area of like Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri. And I will never, ever, ever forget sitting on the steps in my folks' basement, and they were all set up downstairs, and I saw the drums. And it was like a beeline. I couldn't explain it because music was always around, but it had never hit me, you know? Like Dad played all the time, guitars were always around. It was not a foreign thing. Saw drums, and it was like, oh, man, yeah, that's sexy. That's it. The drummer, Mike Shard, was kind enough. He saw it, and he saw my fascination. And he told my dad, he's like, hey, man, like, we're rehearsing here. Is it cool if I leave my drums? Tyler can mess with them. It was this beautiful,
so cool.
Yeah, it was this beautiful old Ludwig kit. And I still have a love affair with it. And he still has that kit, and it's always a pleasure to see it and play it. And from there, man, every day after school, I would come home and beat on it and learn, and my feet could barely touch the pedals, and like he championed me to this day. Like he comes out to FGL shows and hangs out.
That's so cool, man.
And all of those people involved, and we'll get into this, have become ridiculously important in my life. But to get back to the question, I just was fascinated with drums and music, and it became something quickly I excelled at. Not even realizing it. I never knew it was not normal. I just did it. And they were playing, I think it was Excelsior Springs at this community center thing. And afterwards I got up and played a drum solo, and it was like people kind of freaked out. From there, man, it was like that they never took it so seriously that I wasn't included. And I've only recently started to realize how unbelievably beautiful that was.
Yeah, that's very cool.
These dudes who like the closest they're ever going to get to like, music and like playing professionally was this band, and they made a lot of money doing it, a lot of corporate things. And whenever the opportunity arose, they always made it an important priority to include me.
That's really nice.
And that is something I'll forever cherish. And that is really what fostered my love of music, was being able to get out and play in front of people at these ridiculously young ages. And I never had stage fright, which coincidentally now I get it, because now there's like a profession and putting
it's a little bigger audience now.
Yeah, but then, man, it was my escape. I was a terrible student, awful, and a lot of it was I never applied myself because all I wanted to do was play music. But I also had a hard time concentrating, and I was never good at math, and I was always kind of an outcast of sorts. Because I just, that's all I wanted to do. So music became this much greater thing, this escape. And so I just dove into it head first, man. Just
like your safe place.
100%. I'd come home, and in my parents' basement, they had this back room that was a bedroom. And that became like my little drum room. So a couple of years later, my folks bought me my own kit for Christmas. I'll never forget. My mom came in with like these jingle bells and like woke me up and startled me, and I started crying. I remember it to this day, man. Like, and I walked in the living room, and there my kit was stacked up.
You must have been so stoked.
Oh, dude, I would be on. like that was my rocket ship, dude. Like that was, it was my safe place, Craig. It was awesome. And from there, it was every day for hours. I would just play drums, and whenever people would come over to the house, I'd want them to come down and see me play, because that was my form of validation. That's what I was good at.
Yeah.
And it just drove this passion, and it was awesome.
Most guitar players that start off playing, I heard an interview actually many years ago. Warren Haynes was saying the best thing you can do as a guitar player is learn how to play drums.
Yep.
And oddly enough, the guys I know that are guitar players who started out playing drums are phenomenal guitarists, and they always approach the guitar differently because they're approaching it, rhythmically, like with the drummer's mindset, and the sound is totally different.
The biggest compliment I've ever gotten as a guitar player was from a buddy who actually recently passed away. His name is Derek Wyatt. He's an unbelievable drummer. Kelly Clarkson and Point of Grace and a bunch of big bands. We used to do a lot of studio dates together because we played with this guy named Logan Mize. And one day he just looked at me after cutting the track, and he goes, "Man, your pocket is ridiculous." He goes, and to hear that was like, man, you can play all the blazing licks in the world, but when you can lay down a pocket and your right hand can just fall behind the beat and understand, like, there's an in front of the click, there's on the click, and there's behind the click, and then there's everything in between. That all of those years of playing drums, I realized at that moment, I never thought about it, but it did. It's a great thing to be able to have that.
Awesome. Very cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry this guy died. That's terrible, man.
Man, he had Crohn's disease really bad, and he was just kind of in a difficult part of his life, and such a beautiful human he really was. And it was incredible when he passed away how many people came together. And just everybody who loved him, his legacy will live on. But yeah, his disease got the best of him, man. And like so many, it took him away, but he's still with us. I still listen to those tracks all the time we recorded, and I'm like, man, I'm sorry he's gone, but I'm glad we had him.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what was the final straw then that pushed you over the edge from percussion to guitar?
It was a gradual progression. I used to when I was growing up, I had all these images of like wanting to play professionally and be in arenas and do all this stuff. And we went to concerts all the time. So when I was much younger, when my dad was at work, I used to go downstairs and get a couple of his guitars out and act like I was playing. I was fascinated by it, and it looked like fun. And I thought the guitar was a sexy instrument. And, I don't know. I was just always kind of fascinated with it. And then one day, I never got in trouble for it. I was always like, "Oh man, Dad's gonna get mad." And instead, he had this Les Paul. It's actually this one right here.
Oh, that's a Black Beauty.
Yeah, man.
How old is that?
This is a 91, and it's got a really cool story. So I'll backtrack, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
All this kind of goes together.
Yeah.
So he played in this band, Poker Face, and there was a guitar player in that band named Mike Walker. And Mike was a great guitar player, but he was fascinated with all things he could tinker with. He loved airplanes. He worked on cars. He raced old cars and like drag races and stuff. So he was very mechanically minded. My dad has always been a Strat guy, but he always wanted a Les Paul. So for Christmas one year, Mike called him, and we were on our way out to my grandparents' house in Lee Summit, I think. I think that's why we were out there. He lived on the way. Mike did. And he told my dad, he's like, hey, man, stop by the house. Like, and he's like, I got something for you for Christmas. And Mike was like, never got too excited about anything. So the last thing Dad thought was a guitar, right? So we get there, and Dad comes out of the house carrying this guitar.
That is so cool.
The body was red. The neck was black. Mike had gone to this place that had a whole bunch of like bastard guitars and just like parts. And he got 2 Les Pauls. One had a good neck and a bad body. The other. So we went home one night. I like to imagine he was in the basement, popped open a beer, and was like, I'm going to build Phil a Les Paul.
Because he's a tinkerer.
Yes. And so he did. Dad took it to our good buddy Scotty Yates, who was a luthier and a repair guy in Kansas City, also an amazing guitar player. Had him finish it black, put these Fralin PAFs in there that are still in here today, and this was my first guitar. My dad was like, you love that guitar, I don't play it that often. You're welcome to play it.
Wow, what a great...
Yeah, so...
Beautiful. Is that ebony or... It's rosewood, yeah.
It is rosewood. The neck has been broken on this thing like 7 times. I let a buddy borrow it. Here's the crazy story, too. I let a buddy borrow this for an audition in Nashville, which I ended up going down to. It's I've never really put all this together. This is an awesome story to me. If anyone else finds it awesome, that's great too. So, worlds collide. This guitar was my first guitar. I learned how to play guitar. My buddy Brandon Paddock was a dude I met in high school he had just gotten Pro Tools right when it came out. And we would nerd out and pick records and try to recreate them.
Sure.
We'd mic everything up. I'd play drums and bass. He would play bass and guitar. I was just kind of learning to play guitar, so I'd fuss through it. And we would set up the science projects of recording studios in my folks' basement with the sound gear we had. And we would take like these John Mayer records and these Maroon 5 records that were coming out at the time that were just sonically perfect. Whether you like the music or not, they just sonically sounded unbelievable. And we would try to match them.
Dude, hold on. I have to tell you, I got James Valentine coming on like next week from Maroon 5.
Well, there you go. And so Brandon and I became best friends. And to this day, we don't get to talk that often because he moved to L.A. and is now a very successful engineer and producer. But cool. To this day, we're still great friends. I let him borrow this guitar for an audition in Nashville that he convinced me to come down and play drums on. So follow me here. I let him borrow this guitar. It gets knocked off the stand and the headstock breaks.
Oh, my God.
Since that day, pretty much every year at some point, this freaking guitar falls and the headstock breaks. I get the FGL gig. This guitar got thrown my 3rd gig before I was fortunate enough to meet Bev and the fine people at Paul Reed Smith. Opened the case and the headstock was broken. Thank God it hasn't broke since then, so knock on wood. In that audition that I was convinced to come down here from Kansas City with, I met Brian Bonds, the original lead guitar player for Florida Georgia Line.
That is wow.
And this is to anyone watching this. If you want any advice from your friend Tyler, keep your contacts up. Meet people. You don't have to be fake. You don't have to be annoying, but you never know who you're going to meet that's going to help you get to where you're supposed to be. Never underestimate the importance of the social aspect of what you do in anything that you do, music or otherwise. So I met Brian, kept up with him. He was a great guitar player. I played drums on this audition. So I moved to Nashville in 2010, and we'll get back to where we're at in the interview. I kept up with him. I moved to Nashville. He loved cigars. So I was like, hey, man, let's go get a cigar. And he introduced me to my enjoyment of cigars now. A trip to the bathroom vomiting later when you realize that you're not supposed to inhale.
Oh, God.
But you want to hang out with your buddy. And you come back.
God, I can't imagine how sick you must get off of that. Because I'm a cigar smoker, as we talked about last week. But
yeah,
like,
I'll never forget that, man. There's Belmead Cigar, and at that point, he and his wife Michelle lived over Belmead, and we lived in that West End when we moved. And we'd go to the shop, and he'd introduce me to people. It was kind of like our common ground where, oh, you should meet this person. I'll invite him for cigars. I've never smoked a cigar, man. Like, I didn't know. So, freaking, this is like a month and a half after we moved. I'm guessing, but I think. And I'm smoking these light cigars, and we go next door to this little Mexican joint, and we come back, and I get a more bold cigar because I'm like, oh, I've eaten, got some stuff on my stomach. And, man, I turned green, went to the bathroom, and came back. Everyone in the shop is dying laughing. And they all know. They all know. And we became really, really great friends, man. And when the opportunity came for the phone call the first time for FGL, because I played with him twice, that contact came to fruition. And he had recommended me for some other stuff, and it turned into what would be in 2011, playing with FGL for the first time. So that was the transition into guitar. Was Dad gave me this guitar, and I just became fascinated with it. Now that I had permission to play, I heard Richie Sambora playing, like, you know, on Slippery When Wet, and that type of blues playing I thought was awesome. Stevie was huge. Dad being a Strat guy, that was very around a lot. Clapton was a huge one. And it became an escape. Drums, as I got into high school, I was very blessed to be I was really good, without sounding egotistical. At that point, I realized that I had a talent that I needed to work on in terms of it could make me money. I could monetize it. I could get a scholarship with it. And it kind of took on this pressure of being more than an escape, which music had always been for me outside of scholastic activity. So guitar became the escape. I could go do these juries for high school and college and do all this stuff. And then one of the mistakes I made was I no longer started preparing for these things for percussion. So I would show up in high school, and Eddie Owen, my band teacher, would get so pissed because you like, just learn the marimba solo. And I'm like, I don't want to, man. I'm playing guitar. It's awesome. And he's like, but you still got to concentrate on what can propel you. So I ended up getting a scholarship to Missouri Western for recording for what Brandon and I had been doing in the basement. I had no idea at the time, man. We were just messing around, trying to make these recordings. I turned them in. And Mark Elting, the head of recording at Missouri Western, was like, what is this? I was like, me and my buddy are just screwing around in the basement, man. We just want to get the best sounds we can. And it turned into a scholarship.
You probably submitted like a full on album or something.
Dude, it was just it was a bunch of covers of stuff we had done. And it was twofold because I played drums on it. And it was the recording engineering thing. So it really helped me in more ways than I realized, being able to do that. And at the time, I didn't know it. I was ignorant. You know, I just loved what I was doing. So I'm, playing guitar, and then I was raised on 90s country as well, because that's what Dad's band played. And so I kind of had some bastardized country licks, and I enjoyed it. And so I started filling in for people around Kansas City, namely Dan Weller, who is now in Florida Georgia Line and was before me, which is ridiculously
nuts, man.
It took being an FGL for us to play music together, because he would always go play with Colt Ford or Bobby Pinson or these people in Texas or whatever. And then I kind of got into the circle he was in, where then I would go play with these people when he would get a bigger gig. And so, yeah, that guitar became this thing on accident that I just enjoyed. And much like drums did, I invested all of myself in it, for better or worse, and it became something bigger than expected, and awesome. And that was kind of the transition to fully playing guitar, still playing drums a lot, and making a good amount of money playing drums in different corporate bands and stuff like that. So
it's always amazes me, like the serendipity of things. Like, what was the likelihood? It just marvels me the way the world works. Like, take a step back at the big picture. You went on that audition to meet your buddy who was with FGL, but you didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's always like, I always say you can't connect the dots moving forward. You look back and the likelihood of things happening sometimes, are minuscule. And sometimes it's like a multiple things have to happen at once. But it's almost like, if that's the universe or, God or a spiritual being this is what you got to do, man. And it's like, it's going to get done. It's really weird.
Yeah, it was so wild, man. And looking back at it, the time frame wise, if you want to go down that part of the road, like I quit college in 2006 because Missouri Western, and they're great at it, was geared towards music education. And I never perceived myself an educator. I had taught some lessons. I did not enjoy it. I just had a different vision for what I wanted to do. And that involved Nashville. We went down to CRS, which is like a country radio seminar is what it stands for. And they got a group of us from the college to go down and like stuff backpacks and whatnot and pamphlets. And so we went down and did that. And me being as ADD as I am, was like, oh, there's music happening down in the convention hall. So I just got up and walked off. Not trying to be belligerent. I was just like, I want to go see what's going on. Keith Urban, sound checking.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm a massive Keith fan.
What year was this? What year is this?
This would have been 2000. Would have been the end of 2005, beginning of 2006, loosely.
Was that Chris Rodriguez playing with Keith then?
Oh yeah, that's where I learned what an Arion stereo chorus is. Man, I'll never forget. Afterwards, I walk up to him and I'm like, dude, that Making Memories of Us song, you hit this chord and this beautiful chorus came on, but it wasn't a Leslie, but it was. That's got to be some expensive thing. And he goes, no, man, it's an Arion stereo chorus. You can get them for $20, but buy 2 or 3 of them because it'll break.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I've had one and it is incredible.
That's so funny.
And man, Chris, holy cow, dude.
Great guy, great player.
Great player. And then you hear his mouth opens and the notes that come out and it's like angel singing or something. It's good. He's incredible. And he's from the Bronx, like I am. Is he really?
When I interviewed him, I said, we're on a mission to interview every professional Puerto Rican guitarist in the Bronx, and I got him.
That's great.
I got him here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, man, it was that era. It was that beautiful era of that band.
Yeah.
Playing with him. I think Mark Hill was still on bass. It might have been Jerry Flowers by that point. Definitely Chris Rodriguez. Chris McKee was on drums. And I walked up to the front of the stage, and their guitar tech, Mark, was testing Keith's stuff. And I walked up, having I was not shy at all. And I was like, oh, man, that's like an old push-pull comp cut full drive too, isn't it? And he's like, yeah, man, can I help you? I was just honest with him. I'm like, this is who I am. Here's what I'm here for. And he was like, well, you can come hang out. So he took me around and kind of showed me backstage. And I was hooked. I was like, I can be a part of this. I don't know how, but I want to be a part of this. And it was clear in that moment that I was going to move to Nashville. And there was nothing that was going to stop me from it. And Mark Larice is his last name, and he now texts for Luke Bryant. And I came home and I started kind of talking to my parents, putting the bug in their ear that I wanted to leave college. and moved to Nashville. And they were scared, especially Mom, who I haven't spoken about this entire time, but you talk about a saint who was always behind me no matter what. Dad, being a musician himself, was always incredibly supportive because, he had the opportunity at one point to move to Nashville, and he decided to take a different career path and work for the government for 35 years. There are times where he wishes he would have moved to Nashville. So, there's an aspect of this where he had immense support because he wanted to see that come true for me. And Mom, while it scared her to death because she's like, how's my baby boy going to take care of himself? She was awesome. And so I quit college in 2006 and realized how scared shitless I was. And it would take almost 4 years for me to move. Or 3 years for me to move. 4 years.
Yeah, but you were gigging that time. You were like probably smart. I mean, would your destiny have changed dramatically? That's not a lot of time.
No, but for honesty's sake, it's why I didn't immediately move.
Yeah.
I quit college and it was like, oh man, I've got to do this now. And I was scared to death. And at that point, I was still young, very young and green. And so I worked at this recording studio in Kansas City called Covenant Recording, owned by an awesome dude named Jim Waggy, Brandon, who I've spoken about a lot, he and I started working at this recording studio.
Okay.
And so at that point, my role there was to help Brandon engineer in the way of setting gear up, tuning drums for his studio. I would play on a fair share of stuff. I was gigging in a corporate band playing drums. At this point, I was playing in a few bands playing guitar. And in hindsight, it was incredible training.
Yeah.
Incredible training personally, professionally, emotionally, all of it, man. Getting to see bands come into the studio and work with them. I was playing in a band at the time called Xavier's Son. It's kind of like Foo Fighters meets Muse. So I was getting to play a lot and create. And those were some incredible moments that would come to help me way down the line now that I'm doing it professionally. And it was a beautiful limbo time of figuring myself out and getting to the point where push had to come to shove. And it was time in 2010. It was October 16th. I'll never forget. I set a date. There was a project I was working on in Kansas City with this dude that was with Sony. And, like everybody, all these promises are supposed to come true. All this stuff is supposed to happen. Yeah. And I finally got to the point after my dad sat down with me in the driveway and was like, listen, put up or shut up. Kind of that beautiful,
Good
tough
for
love
him. Yeah.
of like, I'm sick and tired of seeing you sit around and waste time. You got to get out of mom and dad's house.
Good.
By this date, and this is what's going to happen. Figure it out. Like, you're not going to waste our time anymore. In a great way.
And let me tell you, that was a tough conversation. As a dad of kids that are just a little younger than you that has had to have conversations like that, that's a tough conversation to have. Your dad was aching after he had that conversation. Trust me.
And what's funny about it is it didn't strike me at all, and still doesn't. I was never frustrated by it. It was almost like permission, like, oh yeah, I got to get out of it. Like, I got to go do something. Mm-hmm. So looked at the calendar, October 16th. We'll just pick a day. And I picked October 16th. And, like was to happen. Nothing happened with that dude I was working with at this recording studio. It was a different studio, not Jim's. It was a different recording studio in town that this dude was working at with these people that were supposedly on Sony, and I was supposed to get this money, and it didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. I moved to Nashville. I called my buddy Brian up, and I said, I'm here. Teach me how to smoke cigars. What do you like to do? Let's go do that. And it was cigars. And that started my Nashville journey. And it started this, I became part of this group of transplants from Kansas City that would go on to do incredible things. My buddy Evan Weatherford, who grew up a block away from me. My parents were in his wedding and vice versa. He's now the guitar player for Little Big Town.
That's wild.
And I mean, literally a block away, bro. Like Lester Estelle, who plays drums with Kelly Clarkson, was in a band called Pillar, lives down the road in Spring Hill from me. Jeremy Warden, bass player in town, has played with numerous amounts of big artists in the country world. Luke Sullivan, another guitar player in town, now plays for Kelly Clarkson and played with Mandisa for a long time. And I know there's more I'm forgetting. Dan Weller, my buddy I play in FGL with, Kansas City guy.
That's wild.
I mean, and I became part of these people, this group that just moved down at the right time. And at that time, the Kansas City music scene was starting to kind of fall apart. DJs were coming in more than ever. Live music didn't have the weight it once did.
Sure.
And clubs weren't paying. And so Evan had come down, and he was kind of the one that kind of championed me, whether he realizes it or not, through his success. I was like, oh, he moved down and did that. I want to go down and do that. And as I saw him having success, I was like, oh, I see how it's attainable.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, that makes sense. You had a role model.
Yeah, exactly. And
which gives you confidence. Oh, if he could do it, I could do it.
Yeah, another person that I give, he always denies it every time I tell him, but it was around 2011 when I found out who the infamous Tom Bukovac is. And I found him on the gear page, man. I got on and I sent him a note. And I didn't know what a GERM was at this time. I didn't know, like, you're not supposed to do crap like that.
Right.
And, dude, like, I found out he was playing at 3rd and Lindsley, and my buddy Ben and I got in the car and drove to Nashville. And I bought him a beer, and I was like, can I hang out with you? Will you give me a guitar lesson? And he agreed. And, unfortunately, our schedules didn't align to be able to do that. But, dude, he would randomly send me text messages the next year. Out of nowhere. Hey, Kat, when are you moving? Hey, what are you up to?
Very cool.
Hey, you need to get to town. And he was my guitar hero. Like, I started studying his playing, and like anyone who listens to this that knows who he is, I'm one of a million people who did this.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player.
But at the time, I didn't know. To me, it was this dude that I had found, and it was like, oh my God.
Like, nobody knows about this guy. Little did you know. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And then you move to Nashville, and everyone's got a Princeton, and everyone's got a 335 with the Bixby, and everyone has a Nobles Overdrive. And you're like, oh, okay. I'm late to the party.
Yeah.
But no, man, he was a huge champion, and I don't think he'll ever realize what that meant for someone that I looked up to and aspired to be so much, to be texting me going, hey, man, get to town. It's not going to happen. When are you moving? When? And it was like, shoot, if he's telling me, I should probably go.
Yeah.
And I would recommend to anyone listening to this, especially in this world of social media and everything, nobody's unattainable. Fear makes people unattainable.
Yeah, 100%.
Reach out to the people you look up to, and I don't care how big they are. Chances are, if you're authentic, that comes across, and that kind of shatters a lot of barriers. And it did with Tom. I didn't know how huge he was. Just reached out, and it turns out his crap stinks too.
Yeah.
And we shared a couple beers, and that was the inspiration I needed. And it can be for anyone, with anyone that they look up to. But yeah, that was what pushed me over the edge to get to Nashville.
Tom Bukovac's pat on the back. Yeah, that's a good push.
Yeah, that was
pretty encouraging.
It absolutely was, and it was great, man. And so, yeah, that kind of got me to 2010 when I moved.
That's really a good story, man.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: when you started off with FGL, you were a rhythm guitar player. I was. Today, you're lead guitarist and band director. How did that all come about? And what are your responsibilities as a band director?
I'm a psychologist.
Well, you're only I've told you this before the interview started. At 32, you've done it. I mean, that's a pretty. You're band director on a major tour. You know, this isn't like band director of the clubs, a band that's playing clubs. It's a massive responsibility. To answer the first question, so I played in 2011 with the guys as a part of this thing called the Best Damn Country Tour. It was Florida Georgia Line, Chase Rice, and Brian Davis.
It's 3 artists, 1 band, 1 toured bus, and we go around and play. So that was my introduction into Tyler and Brian Kelly, who we call BK. Brian Bonds was playing guitar, and they needed a guy to come in and play like banjo and a little bit of slide and rhythm guitar. And we got along great, and it was a blast. And then I left and went and played with other artists.
So you were like utility guy in the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So I left, did other stuff because that tour ended, and they went back to a van and trailer. They couldn't afford to keep that type of personnel on their own. And so that was the end of it. And that was 2011. I went and played with a few other people. Fast forward to kind of like August of 2013. I was playing with my buddy Logan Mize, and he was using us in the studio all the time, and that it was perfect. It was awesome. But it had gotten to the point where I was getting ready to get married, and that was kind of, I don't want to use the word stagnant, but it wasn't growing at a rate that I wanted it to be, or he wanted it to be. And so the phone rings, and it's Brian, and he's like, "Hey, man, the guys are thinking about adding another guitar player to the mix. Your name came up, and would you want to audition?" Because at this point, Cruise is out. They've got a #1 single, and it's no longer Call Your Buddy Tyler. It's management is involved. And,
right.
and me being a buddy is almost works to my disadvantage because it's like, oh, he's a friend.
Right.
Now, that never was a conversation, but it's certainly, I understood between the lines of, oh, yeah, I've got to audition. Like, this is a real thing now.
Well, I wouldn't say it worked against you. It's just that you had to do what everybody else had to do.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah. There was no special favors.
Exactly. And it could be, I say disadvantage because I feel like a lot of people in that situation could maybe view it as like, what do you mean I have to audition? I played with them before.
No, but you're not that guy. You're almost the guy, like, you come across as like, even if someone gave you the job, you'd say, no, let me audition.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And
you have like this, like, you're very big on earning stuff, which I totally get because I'm very similar to that, but I understand that.
Yeah. So it was me and like 7 other dudes and learning the tunes. And God, I want to see this audition video so bad because I didn't play with a band. I played with tracks to a video camera at SIR in the biggest room they have, mind you. So like I walk in and you've got to dress and act like you're playing to 30,000 people because that's what they're seeing.
Right.
And so I went to the mall and bought black clothes and did my hair all up and came in trying to be Billy Badass. And man, I learned my parts forward and backwards. I learned parts that weren't mine, learned vocal parts, and came in and I was very fortunate to get the job.
Good for you.
And that preparation paid off. And so I started out, my role was not dissimilar to what it was the first time I played with him. Rhythm guitar, a couple vocals, but Dan, the other guy at the time, well, he's still there, but at the time he was covering most of the vocals and did it great. So that was simply an add-on if needed. So I was playing rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar. And it was great, man. I really enjoyed it going back to being a drummer. Playing rhythm guitar was a lot of fun in that band, and there's a lot of really great parts on those records when you start dissecting them that are really fun to play. So I was just having a blast, man, and that lasted for a couple of years. And then our lead guitar player, Brian, was dealing with some personal stuff. That's all I'll say about it. And it came to a head in Canada where Tyler and BK pulled me in the production office and were like, hey, we're going to send Brian home to get some help. We're going to put you in the lead guitar spot. And by the way, you're going to be band leader. And by the way, we are leaving for Hawaii in 3 days after this. Can you learn the entire set? The second show after Hawaii is Stagecoach, and it's televised.
Wow.
So have fun.
Not too much pressure.
Yeah. And like anything, you say yes. You don't think of, you say yes, and you figure it out. Because if I wouldn't have, they would have gotten someone else.
Yeah, you lose your whole career.
Yeah. And so I took that opportunity.
And knowing because the other guy is going to have to do the same thing. So you got a hell of a leg up on a stranger. So you might as well make the best of it.
100%. And it couldn't have been more beautiful, man. So Jimmy Deegan was our guitar tech at the time, who now Jimmy is the band leader and rhythm guitar player for Kane Brown.
Holy smokes.
But at the time, he was our guitar tech. And when I got married in 2014, Jimmy filled in my spot. He is the best rhythm guitar player I have ever heard in my life, ever. He came from the rock world. And there is no one that plays rhythm guitar like Jimmy that I have experienced to this day. And so moving up into that spot, it was like, oh, we'll just get another guitar tech. Jimmy's going to go back to my position because he's already done it. So his year is made because now he's in the band. He's not teching for the band. And we hired our buddy Alan Cothran to do stage right guitar tech. And it took about a month to fall in, man. Like, those are hard parts to play. And while I'd listened to them the whole time, you know, that's a lot to take on in 3 days.
Yeah, and I think realistically their expectations were not like you're coming in 3 days and it's 100%. That's not realistic for anybody to expect that.
And I'm not a shredder by any means. I grew up playing blues and country, and so there were a lot of choices I had to make learning the material of what things I could handle and what things I was going to play a little bit differently, because at the end of the day, it's Tyler and BK's name.
Yeah.
And if I'm up there trying to struggle through a record part that I can't play yet, I'm not going to put them or myself in that position. So it took a couple months of finger gymnastics, and a couple of the songs, if I'm being really honest, it took about a year to play them correctly, because I didn't grow up playing shred stuff. And there's some of that stuff that's really fast, and some of that stuff, Ilya Tuchinski played it, and it's like, good Lord, man. Like,
I don't know him, but I've heard about him from a number of people.
I don't have a third arm. That guy has gifts that are unbelievable. And so, yeah, it was a lot of trying to be really mature about learning the gig properly in a short amount of time. And I did. And I'll go back and watch that Stagecoach from like the second gig I played. And it's funny to hear how bastardized some of those guitar solos are. They're good. But this gig demands that you play things as the record and as closely as humanly possible. It is not an improvisational situation. There are parts that were given that are, but for the most part, they're not. So Brian came back about 4 months later after being home and getting some help, and he came back, and unfortunately, the things he was dealing with were a little bigger than going home for 4 months. And so, unfortunately for him, and unfortunately, he was let go permanently. And that really ended up being a good thing for him, ultimately, in my opinion, because he got to go home and be with his family and get some help. So my role turned into a permanent one. And I, you know, and being band leader in that band is a little different than what I envisioned it. And it caused some headaches for the first couple of years, because I envisioned it as band leaders that I had looked up to, Chris McHugh, stuff where you're working with the artist and you're part of creative and you're part of doing all of these things. In this particular group, management, in a good way, they help the artist make those decisions. Your position is to make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to do and when, and to make sure everyone's prepared and whatnot. You're not, in my role now, it is to a bigger extent, but at the time it was not a creative role, and that took me a little while to figure out. And once I did, it became a lot more smooth sailing.
What do you see happening moving forward, if anything, or what would you like to see happening? Because you got your hands in production and you're doing tracks.
Yeah. I love playing with the guys, and our schedule right now is light enough that I get to go out and be a part of that, and that's awesome. But I have the time at home to cultivate doing demo work, which I've started doing a lot of, thanks to being a part of Florida Georgia Line. Because a big portion of my demo work is from their publishing company they started.
Okay. So now they're getting – okay, wow. Okay, that's really smart.
And what's awesome about it is they promote and want me to make extra money on the side. So they don't view my salary as well, you're under salary with us, so you've got to play on our demos. They're like, no, man. Like,
no, they can't do that. Would be like horse shit. And like, because there's no end to where you could take that. That's inappropriate.
Well, and they would. I know.
Yeah.
I know artists who do that.
You're kidding.
You know? And who view those type of extracurricular things as, hey, man, this would be a good opportunity for you. You should do this.
Yeah, well, that guitar player is going to leave as soon as he gets an opportunity because you got to treat people fairly, man.
Yeah, and Tyler and BK have been the complete opposite, and they've been so they'll randomly text me and be like, dude, you crushed that demo the other day. Good. And they're writing on this stuff, so you don't know what's going to end up where, which is awesome. It's what led me to play on Jake's new record. So
once you became a professional, and let's say that, because not that you weren't a professional in Kansas City, but let's call it once you moved to Nashville, because that's where I would consider you really started earning your sowing your oats professionally.
Yeah.
In the big city, in the big music city.
Yeah.
What were some surprises for you as far as like things you weren't expecting, hey, I didn't hear about this kind of thing, if anything?
Yeah. Everyone knows everyone, literally. So that was a big thing, not negatively. It was just like everyone literally knows everyone. And I thought this was cool. Everyone assumes you're great until you prove them otherwise. I found it, for me, easier than I anticipated it to be. Granted, I had done some groundwork in meeting people. I'd come down and met Tom. I'd come down and met Brian through that audition. And after that, I would randomly come down and kind of keep contacts up before I moved. But I got a lot of opportunities without having to audition because of being social and people. When you put yourself in a position here in Nashville, and especially now that there's social media and people can see how good you are, but at the time that I moved, that wasn't that big yet. People just assume you're good, or it's going to be hilarious. Hey, let's get him in here. He said that he seems like he can pull it off. Most people are smart enough not to put themselves in those positions if they can't handle it.
Yeah, I think in Nashville, everybody knows it's that you don't come there if you're not really, really good.
Yeah, and so that was cool, man. I wasn't necessarily expecting that, and it allowed for a lot of opportunities where someone would just put your name in the hat for something, and they would call, and you'd be like, "Well, do you need me to send you anything?" No, so and so said you could do it. Oh, well, thanks, so and so.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So I appreciated that. Negatively, man, I was so excited to be here that I really didn't have many situations. I started to get a little stage fright, which was the first time that had ever really happened, where I'd start getting some anxiety on stage and be like, why am I nervous right now? And you'd look at, like, I'll never forget playing with Logan at a showcase, and I looked out and Derek Wells was sitting in the audience, and I ended up hitting a couple bum notes because those things I hadn't experienced playing in front of peers like that before, these people that I knew and held in high esteem. That was something to this day I still deal with, and I view myself as a confident player, but I also realize that you want to be good, you want to play well, you want people to think you're the jam, and especially the guys that are in the session world. It seems that often you get one opportunity, and those people figure out really quickly whether you can hang or not, and I want to hang. And so at that point, I was still pretty green, and that was a surprise. I wasn't necessarily expecting.
I think that's really reasonable, though, when you got like a guy who could, who's someone you look up to in town. Yeah, and I don't think that's. And look, I've heard stories from guys like Steven Tyler and so on and so forth who still get stage fright and feel queasy, get the jitters before they go out on stage.
And I think that's a good thing. I think at the point that you lose that, you should re-examine because, those are the same jitters that keep me on my game.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
And so it was just, they popped up from different emotions than I was expecting the first few times I was put in situations where you're playing in a room where it's not abnormal for the guys that you read about on the records you listen to are now sitting in the room getting a beer after their work is done. And you're like, oh man, I didn't prepare for this. I'm not a big fan of surprises, and this is a surprise.
Well, I think anytime you're like, if I was looking at all the people listening to this show while I was interviewing somebody, I'd have freaking jitters. Trust me. It would not be, as laid back here. I'm sure of it. So I think that's totally normal, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Any kind of, like, if you had to go back and maybe give advice to your younger self, I mean, you're a young guy, but you've been at this a while. What advice would you have given yourself?
Be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself, and don't try to be what other people want you to be. I spent a lot of the first few years in Nashville trying to figure out what people wanted. And it resulted in me getting fired from a gig that I probably should have. It was a great gig, and it was Love and Theft, and I was playing drums.
Oh, interesting.
But I was so into having that gig that I didn't do my job, and I learned a lot because I was so busy getting the endorsement, and I was so busy getting the gear together and making sure people knew that I was on the gig that I didn't spend time serving the artists. Getting fired from that gig was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, ever. And I ended up reading a book called 25 Notes for the Successful Musician, written by Chad Jeffers. Shortly after I got fired, I had read it when I moved to town, refound it after I got fired, and I was like, oh man, this is what this book talks about. And I got right back up on the horse because I didn't want to become a statistic. And yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow, man. That was a hard one because I was trying to be what other people wanted me to be. I wasn't staying true to my integrity and the things that I knew were important, which was preparation and being humble. And, I was getting my rocks off on having my first.
Well, I'm glad you bounced back from that. Yeah, I know you're big on self-study in general. And
yes.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you like to study?
Man, I've just become fascinated with God again. Refound that and self-study through that. But there's a book called You're the One You've Been Waiting For. That was a huge book that I read right after my daughter was born.
That's a good title. I like that.
Yeah, and it was an incredible book. The author escapes me right now, but I'll send that to you. And whatnot. My dad experienced some anxiety and some things working for the government that put him in a position to start going to see a psychiatrist, which I became fascinated with, absolutely fascinated with, as I started becoming successful playing with FGL, because there hit a point, being totally honest, where I had everything I'd ever wanted. I had a beautiful wife, a beautiful daughter, this amazing job. Why wasn't I happy? Why wasn't I satisfied? Like, why is this not the best thing in the world? And I realized that somewhere along the way when I moved to Nashville, I had kind of lost myself. And getting fired from Love and Theft was kind of the beginning of that realization of that I would come to find out. And that's when I went and started talking to a psychiatrist, which anyone listening to this who feels the need to go do that, go do it. It's one of the best things you can do. It doesn't mean you're sick or something's wrong with you. It means
anybody who hasn't had therapy is nowadays in the U.S. is more of a rarity than anybody who has,
And man, and that just put me down in this amazing path of like realizing who I am again, and being a follower of Christ and learning, getting back to the simplicity of what it is we're doing here, and that is to just at the risk of sounding totally just hippie or whatever, life's pretty simple, man. Just be good to each other and ourselves. And I've been given this amazing ability to play music for a living, and it's to help other people and bring joy to folks. And for a long time, I was taking it way too seriously.
That being said, I give you a lot of credit for looking inward when you got fired from Love and Theft, because most people would probably not do that. You know, they'd be like, oh, those guys are fucking assholes, and or it doesn't have to be love and theft. Anybody, fill in the blank. You know, most people don't look inward initially when they have a crisis in their life. You know, they look outward. I know for me, I always try to look like, where was my responsibility whenever something happens, because I don't feel like a victim when that happens.
Yep.
And I hate feeling like a victim. So if I could figure out, okay, I know I had a role in this. What was that role? And sometimes you don't know, and you got to go see a counselor or whoever to figure it out. But
yeah, and it was funny when I got the FGL gig. I all of a sudden started having these panic attacks, and they were really bad. And I could never figure out where they were coming from. And it all started stemming back to that situation of not wanting to be in that situation again. And the more I figured that out, the more, you know, part of the depression when Lucy was born was now I have this added pressure to not get fired from a job, right?
Yeah.
And then you start realizing that, man, you can't control that stuff. Like Stephen and Eric would say this right here, right now, so I'll say it. On the flip side of me getting fired, I was working for two alcoholics that had nothing. They didn't want to have anything to do with what was going on.
Right.
And so you're kind of, you know, shooting in the dark to begin with. At best. And, you know, they're both sober now, and it's awesome, and they're doing great. And we're good friends, and I see them somewhat often, and it's phenomenal. But for whatever reason, and I'm so thankful for it, at the time when I got fired, I naturally looked inward, and I don't mean that to sound like a martyr or anything. It just happened. I refused to be a statistic.
Yeah.
I refused to be one of those people that was like, yeah, I went down to Nashville and I did some stuff and you know, and got bitter. I was like, no, I can do this. Like, and I'm going to keep doing this. And had I not gone through that situation, I wouldn't be playing for Florida Georgia Line. I might still be playing for Love and Theft. And so for a million reasons, it was a really great thing, and it was a great learning experience, and not something to be shameful of in the slightest.
No, not at all. I'm glad you took advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, let's talk gear for a few minutes. Is that look at him, a big smile. I never said that to a guitar player. They said, no, I don't want to do that. What's your go-to guitar right now, and what other two guitars would round out your top three?
All right. This is kind of a long answer. So my go-to guitar right now is a Paul Reed Smith David Grissom.
I interviewed David. Did you listen to that interview?
I have not yet, but I want to. I saw recently that you did, and I have not had an opportunity to listen. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, one of the best interviews I've ever done. A great guy.
That's awesome. His guitar came out, and I've always been a Paul Reed Smith fan, massive. And I have an 86 Paul Reed Smith that I've had for a while that's a very special guitar. And when the David Grissom guitar came out, it could kind of do everything, and I really bonded with that instrument for a lot of reasons. So going backwards.
What year is that, Grissom?
This particular one, I've had a few because I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of wanting to find the best one I can find. This one is a 2011.
Let me see that, man. I want to take a look at that bad boy. It's so sweet. That is such a beautiful. Wow, that looks so pretty. That's ebony too, isn't it?
Yes.
Man, I got this strap here. I love ebony necks. It feels, I mean, I like rosewood, but this is like nothing else, you know? It's just the strap. Well, I love those ebony. And everybody I know who has a PRS, like almost everybody has the David Grissom model. I've never met anybody who hasn't like been nuts over that guitar.
Yeah, it's home, man. This is the third one I've had. I got one from Paul Reed Smith, and it was awesome. And then I found one that I played that just knocked me out, and so I got that one. And then I just found this one recently. It came into my buddy Ryan's guitar shop here in town, and this one was used. It's beat up. It's got marks all over it. Like, the neck is a little different. There's something different about this guitar, and I don't know exactly what it is, but it was just – it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And so I've been enjoying that. And then the two other guitars in my stash that carry extreme sentimental value are, I've got a Tom Anderson from 1994. And this goes back to the beginning of the interview. My dad was playing in that band with Mike Walker, who gave my dad that Les Paul, right? So Mike left that band they were playing in to go back to racing cars with his wife Mel and daughter Sarah, and they would do it professionally and whatnot. I, without getting the story totally convoluted, at one point when I was getting into guitar, I wanted a Tom Anderson because he had one, and I thought it was just incredible. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, man, could I try your guitar for a couple of days before I go and order one? Because it is a ton of money. And he was like, yeah, come and get it. And this point, Mike wasn't playing anymore. He had an injury with his hand while working on a car, couldn't play, so his guitars were just sitting. So I went and picked up the guitar, and I played it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to order a Tom Anderson.
Is it a Strat or a Tele?
It is. It's a Strat. And hold on a minute.
There he goes.
It's too beautiful not to get out. So
no, that's cool, man. You know, I had an Anderson for a while, and it was a Bulldog, which was like the Gibson. I think they actually got a cease and desist on that. And I had never played anything as great. The pickups were pretty bad on that guitar, and I just wound up selling it because of that.
But yeah, it's
a beautiful guitar. It's an ebony also, isn't it?
It is, actually, yes.
Yeah. You like ebony necks as well?
Yes, and it's funny. It's not something I naturally go after, just like I guess subconsciously it is.
Yeah.
So I went to give the guitar back, and he handed the case back to me. He's like, man, the last time I played that guitar was with your dad on stage at the what's the name of the ballroom in Iowa where Buddy Holly played for the last time? I can't remember, and I'm embarrassed.
No, I have no idea.
Do you remember the last time we played the guitar? And he's like, it still has the same strings on it. He goes, why don't you hold on to that and enjoy it for a little while? And I was like, what? It was an anniversary gift from his wife, Mel.
Wow.
And so it became my absolute number one guitar. And very sadly, in 2008, I think it was 2008. No, it was 2009. Mike passed away. He was at a racetrack, and a nitrous oxide bottle dropped. Nozzle came off, hit him in the chest, and killed him.
Oh,
and so,
man.
That was 2010. I apologize. It was 2010, the year I moved to Nashville.
Wow. Sorry about that.
No, I actually have the stickers that were made, the ribbon stickers that were made. I put one on the back of that Les Paul that has the date. So you got your dad's Les Paul, and then you got your buddies, his bandmates, Tom Anderson. You have those are like very sentimental values in those guitars. Yeah, man. His wife bought him this guitar for their anniversary. I also ended up with his Paul Reed Smith. He's got an 86 Paul Reed Smith and a 67 Epiphone Riviera.
Wow, those are great. I'd like to get my hands on one of those, man. Those are nice as hell.
Yeah, but when Mike died, it was around the time I was getting ready to move to Nashville, and I called his widow, Mel. It's like, hey, I'm getting ready to move. I'd like to return these guitars. They're yours. And she goes, no, they're yours. Take them to Nashville. You need to take those and make music with them. And,
wow.
It blew me away, and I still get pretty choked up about it.
Yeah, I could see why. Very special, man.
So this is my number one, and it always will be.
The Anderson.
Yep. And then rounding that out is that Epiphone Riviera. It's a 67, and that guitar has become that's my 335. I know it's not a 335.
No, but you know what? Do you know who Red Volkart is?
Oh, yeah.
Red, I had a really great interview with him. He's a wonderful human being, and I think he was telling me about those initially. He said they're amazing. He said they're phenomenal. If you can get your hands on an old 60s Epiphone Riviera, you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Every 335 I've bought, I end up selling because this guitar, it is a 335. They just, somewhere on the lot in Kalamazoo there, they take them, and for whatever cosmetic or otherwise reason, they make them an Epiphone, and then they cut them for different pickups. But it could have easily been a 335.
Do you know what kind of pickups are in that Epiphone?
Yeah, they're mini humbuckers.
Oh, they are?
They're just Gibson mini humbuckers. Yeah. And they sound unbelievable. But those are the guitars. My number one guitars overall are Paul Reed Smith. Bev and Rich and Win and the people of that company, pardon me, have become family.
Are you endorsed by them? Are you one of their artists? Great. Awesome.
I am. And I'm exclusive with them when it comes to Florida Georgia Line. And I have to use other stuff for the session world. A lot of those situations hear with their eyes, not their ears. And I've learned through situationally, you've got to walk in with the right tools to do the job.
Sure.
And so I've got a Strat and a Tele and a couple Les Pauls and other things that round out the tools that I need. But when it comes to playing guitar, man, I pick up if it's not the Sanderson, I'm picking up a Paul Reed Smith. And
I've never played one of those, man. I've got to play a PRS. Maybe when I come to Nashville, I'll come check out your Grissom because everybody tells me how good they are, man.
Man, I'm very fortunate to have a few PRSs here, and you are welcome to any of them. And their amps as well. I'm a huge proponent of their amps. They're just phenomenal. Their customer service is second to none. When we need parts on the road, they overnight whatever we need.
That's all. Man, what a good artist you are too, like drumming them up authentically too. They should hope. I hope some of them PRS is listening. Treat this guy well. Tyler's your man.
I love him, man, and I will go to the hill for those folks. They certainly did for me at a time where I couldn't afford the gear that I needed for this job, and they were right there.
That's cool, man.
They've been fantastic people.
Are there any players that influence your playing that people might be surprised to hear?
And they're drummers, actually.
Very cool.
Dave Weckl was my first drum idol, and to this day he still is.
Why do I know that name? Who?
He plays with Oz Noy a lot.
Right. I just interviewed Oz last week.
Yeah.
That's where I heard it from. Yeah.
So Weckl and Keith Carlett plays with Oz a little bit, but Weckl is still a major influence on me musically. The smoothness and finesse in which he plays drums, I even try to carry over to in guitar to a certain extent. It's just a fluidity that happens there I enjoy.
It's interesting you mentioned Oz because he's one of those guys, if you listen to his playing, you might think he's a drummer because he's a little bit
very
impressive. Yeah, very, very. Do you know Jim Oblon?
Oh, yeah.
Jim's a drummer.
Yeah. Yes, he is.
And you listen to him, he's an amazing dude.
Yeah, man. But yeah, that would probably be a surprise someone may not know. Some of my biggest musical heroes that influenced me on guitar aren't guitar players.
Yeah, that is cool.
So,
Desert Island Discs. If I asked you to pick your top 3 Desert Island discs, I should change this to Desert Island Downloads now.
That's funny. That's funny because 2 of the 3 of these I actually have on discs. The number 1 would be Archangels with Charlie Sexton and David Grissom. Their self-titled record that came out.
Yep.
That happened at a time where I was learning how to play guitar, and that was influential. My buddy Evan showed me this artist named Kathleen Edwards, and she has a record called Back to Me, and it's very kind of roots rock. Mm-hmm. And a guy named Colin Cripps plays guitar on that, which she used to be married to. And the slide playing on that record is just hauntingly beautiful. And then there's an artist named Jude Cole, who was very popular in the late 80s and through the 90s and early 2000s. And he's now a producer, but all of his records. But there's one called Start the Car. And Tim Pierce played on it, and Michael Thompson played on it. Pardon me. And Jude himself is a phenomenal guitar player. Those were records that I all heard at points in my playing when I look back that my playing took positive turns. And that Jude record especially, I started learning about, without realizing it, texture and parts. And that was a very big record. And coincidentally, I'm a massive Tim Pierce fan. And it was no surprise recently when I found out, when you read deep in the liners, that he was one of the main guitar players on it.
Yeah, he's played on a lot of records for sure.
Yeah, so those would be the 3 that I constantly come back to and go, oh yeah, this is kind of home base for me. So those 3 are great ones.
Tyler, what is something that you've learned about yourself along this little journey so far?
Oh man, learned about myself. I'm not a fan of surprises. I have totally learned that about myself. Oh man!
And what do you mean by that? I'm not a fan of surprises. You like things planned and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a fan of walking into situations that are totally unknown. Totally unrelated to any of this. When I was 3, I had a fairly minor heart surgery, if that's a thing.
Oh, wow.
And ever since then, like, I don't like going to the doctor. I don't like
going to the doctor either.
yeah. I don't like any situation where it's like, hey, we don't, even especially playing wise, like, hey, we're going to play on this TV thing. You have any specifics? Well, we're playing this song. Okay. Even that stuff will kind of get me a little jittery. So yeah, I like things to be planned out.
So you're like probably a little OCD?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I absolutely am.
Yeah.
Like this is so dumb. I'm OCD to the point where like I don't like changing guitar strings on just whatever guitar I'm using at the time. Like I'll like set aside time and be like, all right, I'm going to change the guitar, all the strings.
All the strings. Yeah, that's pretty OCD.
And you know, I went like, like my old MXR compressor here, I always put tape on it with the last date that the battery was changed.
Oh my God, that's
so that I'm not like in a position where I turn it on and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to change the battery. Hey, hold on everyone, I got to change the battery in my compressor.
You know what's funny? You've really served me a purpose here, because my wife's a little OCD, and I'm not going to give her shit anymore because she's not like that. I'd be really freaking out if she was doing stuff like that. Holy crap.
Yeah, so luckily it hasn't turned me into like that TV show Monk or whatever.
Oh my God, that was so funny.
But yeah, I've got little quirks like that where I just for whatever reason, man, I've always kind of been OCD like that. But yeah, that's something I've learned about myself on the journey, and to love myself and to be good to myself.
That's really important, man. That's a good lesson to learn.
Honestly, especially since becoming a dad, it's really that simple. And that's been the biggest thing I've learned, is just love yourself and be good to yourself. You deserve it.
You do. We all do.
And other people deserve it too.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most important thing your dad taught you?
Integrity.
How about mom? Most important thing your mom taught you?
God.
Any hobbies or interests outside of music?
I have an old Corvette that I like to tinker on. I don't know how to tinker on it, but I do anyway. Is
it with you in Nashville, or is it back home?
Nope, it's here in the garage. I currently brakes are above my knowledge level, so I have to have someone come check that out. But I've got a leak in the brake line, so we're going to get that checked out. That's cool. She'll be back on the road.
Very cool. What's the favorite and least favorite part of what you do?
Favorite part of what I do is getting to play music for a living with some of my absolute best friends in the world, and with 2 artists that I've gotten to watch grow from literally nothing to everything. And they have stayed relatively the same, if not better. They've definitely gone through changes, physical appearance and otherwise. But when it comes down to the heart of sitting across from them at a dinner table or hanging out, they're still right there, and I love that. Thing I don't enjoy about it, the fact that it is so corporate and professional sometimes in the music world. That was something that I wasn't necessarily warned about, and it's not all fun and games. It's a very serious thing, and there's a lot of politics involved, and especially in holding a management position with Florida Georgia Line, you have to learn those things.
Yeah,
and they're all positive.
But when it's baptism by fire, that's the problem.
100%. And I've learned so much from their management. And I went through a long period where I was just frustrated with them all the time. And then the older I get and the more that I experience, I realize that what a tough role that is to manage an artist. And you're ultimately responsible for everything, and working with them has become a really great privilege.
It sounds like you've learned so much. Bless you. Yeah. It sounds like you've learned a lot, man.
Yeah.
2 more questions. Toughest decision you ever had to make, or hardest thing you ever had to do?
Leaving Logan to play for Florida Georgia Line.
Yeah.
While that would seem like the easiest thing in the world, like going from like a van and trailer to tour buses, Logan is, and will always be literally a brother. We share more in common than I even care to share with someone, and that was the hardest thing. It was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced in my life. I don't regret it. But to this day, I gave up a lot of myself when I did that, because of how much he had invested in me. And I thought it would have been hard, and it ended up being one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do is make that phone call. Because I had to choose. That was one of those times where music became more than just music. You know, you had to choose your livelihood. You had to make a decision, and unfortunately that involved, you know, us not talking for a while. Rightfully so. He was angry.
Yeah, sure.
And we've since made amends, and we're great, and we're back to being best buds, and have actually made music since then. So it's great. But that's something I was never warned about, like having to like, hey, by the way, you're going to have to like, you know, deny your best friend in order to go put food on the table for you and your wife.
Yeah, it's a tough position for everyone. I don't think it's, you know, I don't think there's any easy, anybody in that transaction is going to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it was funny. That was harder than getting fired, you know, because getting fired is not your choice.
Right. No,
having to fire your artist is a choice.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that from several times, especially when you're in a situation where someone's being, you know, you are being treated well and there is no issues. And I've heard that at all different levels of the music spectrum. Okay. Last question. What's the biggest change in your personality over the last 5 years, and how much of that has been deliberate and how much is just a part of aging?
Maturity and thinking before I act.
That's a tough one.
I used to be a lot more impulsive. You know, I was just young and new to town and green, and now I've got a little bit of world under my belt.
Right.
You know, you got to read people a little bit more, and you've got to make decisions that don't always feel the best. And you know, those aren't bad decisions. Just, you know, my world is a lot bigger than it was 5 years ago.
Sure.
There's a wife and a child in it now, and just the maturity that I try to exercise now. And the forethought I put into things is certainly a lot greater than it was 5 years ago. And it's something I've worked hard at, especially through reading like psychology books and stuff like that. You know, I've accidentally become fascinated with that, and it allows for a lot more insight and forethought.
Well, man, again, congratulations to you for taking that on your shoulders and figuring out how you could do a better job. I think that's awesome. Man, listen, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I want to tell people where to find you online. First of all, it's Tyler Chiarelli, Chiarelli. Go out and check out Tyler when he's on the road with Florida Georgia Line. Where are you guys? I know you were just here recently in Orlando. How did that go? Was that good?
That was fabulous. It was our first festival back for the year. We were off for like 5 months. And we had a couple one-offs, and this past Saturday was like our actual first real gig. And it was beautiful. Weather was beautiful.
Weather was perfect, man.
I texted you. I got to enjoy a cigar.
Yeah, I saw that.
and we got to play music that night, and it was so good to be back. It really was. It was so good to be back at it. So
you coming over here anytime, Tampa?
Same thing? Not that I know of, but I'll be honest with you. I haven't taken a huge gander at our schedule because it's so light this year. I know we're doing a lot of festival work.
Where is it posted? On FloridaGeorgiaLine.com?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Check out Tyler on FloridaGeorgiaLine.com. Come out and support him, support the band. He is also doing a lot of session work in his home studio now. He's doing tracks. So if you like what you're hearing coming out of Florida Georgia Line, you may want to get a hold of Tyler and talk to him about doing some work for you. You could find him on Instagram at Taco, T-A-C-O, Chiarelli, and it's Taco, C-H-I-A-R-E-L-L-I. Anything else? Where else can people find you to send you money?
Man, that's it. Hit me up. I'm totally accessible at Taco Chiarelli Music on Instagram, whether for mentoring or for guitar tracks of any sort. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm about these days.
Awesome, man! Thank you so much for your time. I'm looking forward to seeing where your career goes. You're band leader, music director, and lead guitarist at 32. I think you're doing great, man. I'm excited to see where you're going to go.
Craig, thank you for what you do for all the musicians out there, man. This is an incredible platform, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.
Anytime, man. You can come back whenever you want. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I want to thank so much to Tyler Chiarelli for spending time with us and being so transparent and cool. I really appreciate it. Again, go support him when he's on the road to Florida Georgia Line, or hit him up online at Instagram at Taco Chiarelli Music. And go to everyonelovesguitar.com. Sign up to get notified about future episodes, along with some early product announcements and discounts. And remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play a guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love. Thanks for listening. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.